Hi, and welcome to the Pride Road Architects podcast. I'm Lisa Rains, and each episode I'll talk to people who interest me in the world of architecture and business. So join me and fellow lions and lionesses as we explore architecture in the den.
Yeah.
So, hi everyone, and welcome to Architecture in the Den with me, Lisa Rains. And today I'm delighted that I've got fellow podcaster Austin Williams. So, do you want to just introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, hi Lisa. My name's Austin Williams. I'm an architect, registered architect. I stopped with the RIBA a while ago.
Oh, controversial.
Wow, we can get into that. So I stopped practicing as an architect probably 20 years ago because I then became the technical editor of the Architects Journal. Moved on up from that and worked for NBS film production house with the RIBA, and then I went to China to teach for 6 years in China, and now I'm in Kingston School of Art. So that's my kind of formal salary-paying life. My more interesting life is the fact that I run the Future Cities project, which does events and podcasts and this, that, and the other. So that's me.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, welcome. So I found you on when I was looking for on Spotify for potential podcast guests. So there aren't that many architects or non-practicing architects on Spotify. So I thought I'd just reach out and see. So tell me a bit about your podcast and what you're up to on it.
Yeah, well, it's called Professional Practice Podcasts, which is a snappy title from the fact that I teach professional practice, and it's a podcast. So it's something which I thought I would, and we've talked earlier about this with the air quotes. It's a value added or added value element to the course that I teach at Kingston School of Art.
So is it endorsed by Kingston School of Art?
Endorsed? Right. I'm old school. I'm old school. Okay. So basically, I'm one of those people that acts first and asks permission second.
Yeah.
So in fact, they know I'm doing it. I told them I'm doing it. They wanted to bring it in-house. But to do that would mean that they wanted to have, diversity amongst the staff contributing to it and taking on a interview role, and I wasn't going to let that happen. So basically, it's a private Future Cities podcast done on behalf of Kingston School of Art. Maybe I shouldn't have said that out loud, but that's what it is. So it means that the students are getting my lectures and getting our in-house conversations and seminars and tutorials and what have you every week. But at the same time, I'm trying to bring in additional voices to give them a little bit of a nuanced extra understanding of a variety of topics that we don't have time for in the working week.
Yeah. So how long have you been running it for?
I think I did start the year before COVID.
Before COVID.
Exactly. 1 year BC.
Very good. Yeah.
And then the miracle, basically I was doing it with my little handheld recorder.
Yeah.
First of all, I started filming it. I used to be a filmmaker, and so I used to take a camera and all the kit. Then I kind of compressed it down with a podcast without the images for a little recorder. And then even though I was spending a fortune on recorders, they'd always cock up at the moment when you didn't want it to. You know what I mean? There'd be a glitch in the system. So ironically, and this is a terrible thing to say, but the benefit of COVID was Zoom, as you've discovered with these podcasts yourself, and the miracle of being able to talk to people in other countries, let alone other parts of this country, and to have automatic recording with good quality sound very often, is something which I don't know why we never thought about it before. I was a Skype user before, but I don't know who uses Skype these days.
I used to use Skype. It was awful. the quality.
That's why we didn't do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, when I lived in China, that was my lifeline, to speak to friends in this country.
Yeah, there was often a how do you rate your call?
Yeah.
It's like
But it was
really bad.
It was, and there was an upgrade every couple of days, wasn't there? Which always kind of delayed things. But yeah, so that's really kind of where it comes from, is just to give that extra value to my mainly Part 3 students, but anybody can listen in, and then it's also for newly qualified architects, I think, who maybe can see it as a bit of a CPD extra.
Right, okay. So
No certification.
it's a nice tie-in to what we're doing here, sort
Absolutely.
of like, it's about the business of architecture, all things architecture and business. So sort of refreshing, I think, for any architect, going back and looking at Part 3 content is really important.
Yeah, well, I'm terrible at business, so I'm no businessman, which is why I'm in the public sector. So therefore, I get guests in to speak about business and all the rest of it. But so I'm
really?
topic.
Would you be?
Well, there you go.
So what do you? So have you come across franchising in architecture before?
Well, I hadn't really looked at it in a big way. I've been reading your stuff for the last couple of, well, how long it takes, and it's actually very interesting. I mean, I know franchising
was this before I contacted you or after?
After.
Oh,
after. No,
damn! I thought I was on the radar.
No, sorry. No, what I mean is that you sent me a lot of stuff and a lot of links, and it kind of led me down rabbit holes, good rabbit holes, to kind of look into it. Also, I know what franchising is, and I've friends of mine have done it with IT practices and what have you. And obviously, I know like our Canvas and things like that, who weren't necessarily called franchises, but they became quite an influential practice way back when. So I mean, I like the idea, and I like the efficiency drive of it, because I was thinking when I was reading some of your stuff, it reminded me of practices that I knew that had a central base in, say, London, but then they had another office in Germany and another office in Shanghai, and then when there were lean periods, they would shunt work around. You know what I mean? And actually, that idea of actually having people able to back you up and work on your behalf and be a port of call if you had difficulties, I kind of quite like that shared knowledge experience. So it sounds great to me.
Yeah, it was brilliant. I mean, it is brilliant, but particularly brilliant during sort of COVID, because we pivoted instantly. In fact, it's just I was just quoted in Forbes magazine.
Yeah, look at you.
So there's an article in Forbes. If you Google Forbes and Lisa Raines, you'll see the quote. So at the beginning of lockdown, we were a face-to-face operation, but we pooled knowledge. I'd just started using Zoom a couple of months beforehand, so I was slightly ahead of the curve. I'd had a few clients that I've met through like the home builders and renovation shows, which was kind of outside of my easy to get to. So we did a Zoom call, and that worked. And my colleague Magda, she's been going over to Poland for the summer, so she's been using kind of some virtual technologies before COVID as well, to kind of keep on working. So very quickly I bought a camera, which is, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see my camera overhead. We've got a very, very exciting sort of
very good.
It's on an angle poise arm, and it's pretty effective. And it's just a webcam, but just stuck onto an angle poise. But it works very well. So
that's what, when you're talking to clients, you mean showing them drawings and things like that?
Yeah. So I'll plug it in now. So what have I got on my desk? I've got a markup, something, or start of a markup. Ooh,
very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite nifty, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's quite clear. and it works pretty well. And clients generally go, ooh, and then they get bored. No, they don't.
Well.
No, they find it really engaging. Yeah, so I also ended up during lockdown building things out of Lego.
Good.
Which was just really useful to explain concepts to clients. So this is a Victorian terraced house, and we've got the outrigger, chimneys. I'm missing a chimney actually. So I've got a series of Lego models which are made and then distributed to my franchisees at the time. And it was just really fun, finding ways of engaging. So being part of a franchise, we pull the experience, and then I wrote an operations manual of how to do it, and then we went out and marketed it, and within a week we had a stream of clients going, yes please, yes please, yes please, yes please, and we were incredibly busy.
So how is the market?
How's the market? I would say it's slowing down a little bit. I set up in the recession of in 2010. So, and we just do domestic extensions, and that's it. And what you find is in a recession, clients can't afford to move, but they still need the space, so they have to extend. And then in the boom, they can't afford to move. So
and COVID lockdown gave them disposable income as well for this moment, but obviously that's been eaten away a little bit by the hellish situation of cost of living and price rises and goodness knows what.
You tend to think, people still need to extend. The way that we work, we don't like putting people in negative equity, and we start with a hand-drawn concept design workshop that we do on tracing paper in front of our clients. So I just grab one. We draw them as sort of A3, 1 to 50, and we charge for this exercise. So we'll charge between £300 and £600, whether it's online or in person. We'll give clients a series of options if they want an extension. Is it a small, medium, or large, or will just an internal reconfiguration do? And then we'll ask clients to do their own research, speak to builders to get an idea of cost if they can, or a quantity surveyor, speak to an estate agent to get an idea of value, speak to neighbours to see if there's any showstoppers, and then the clients will come back and then tell us which way they want to go and whether it's viable or not.
But things like party wall malarkey, are you involved in that? I mean, do you offer that, or?
We don't. That's really interesting, but no, we put forward a party wall surveyor. I mean, I find it's quite tricky. What we tend to find is if we include loads of services, our clients don't value them and don't pay any attention to them.
So when I did a short stint as a sole practitioner, I didn't enjoy it, but it was one of those things where, and I started off doing kitchen extensions and what have you, domestic extensions locally, and I was finding, you go away and you do the drawing, and then you'd say, look, it's going to be blah blah blah, over £2,000 for me to do the next couple of stages, and they say, oh no, we've spoken to a contractor, and they said that they would do the planning and building regulation submissions for free. And you say, no, he's hiding the costs in the build cost. You know what I mean? Like, he's not doing it for free, is he? Right? But of course, they could never, once you kind of say, I'm going to set myself apart as an independent agent, and that's what I'm going to do, just a drawing. And then the hero comes along and builds it. You're just a bloke doing some drawings. Do you know what I mean? So you can get some of your services just lost in other people's kind of work because nobody understands really what it is that architects do, let alone kind of appreciates it. But I agree with you that there's so much, principal designer, all these bits and bobs which have been added on, which can kind of confuse the domestic client, especially, as to what on earth am I paying this extra 500 quid for you to be a principal designer when isn't that what you do anyway, kind of thing. So it's the bureaucracy. I mean, I think the bureaucracy, I think the technocracy, and I think the added level of policy and regulation, which is almost going to come like a waterfall in the last decade, is really not helped matters. It hasn't helped architects understand what it is that they do, let alone clients being able to grasp it. So it's a very curious world, and it's getting even more confusing, I think.
I mean, what we've got in the franchise system is, again, we pool knowledge, and we kind of, where we get client confusion is where we tighten up our system and clarify. So we break down our service into sort of 3 stages. First stage is the concept design, second is planning, third is building regs. We do not confuse it any more than that.
Yeah. But you are going for building regs approval, not a notice. You're going for approval.
Yeah, we go for approval.
Okay.
Yeah. The notice tends to that if it's just internal and it's minor works, then we'll leave it to the client to do it on a notice.
Okay. Do you follow it through all the way through on site then?
No, no, we don't. We stop our services at after building regs. Well, we offer a pre-start meeting. We call it free, but the costs are, sort of put elsewhere. We think that's really important, because that's when we meet the builder and the client, and we just stipulate how important it is to contact us if there's any issues.
Right. And are you leaving the contractor side to the client fully, or are you doing any due diligence on their behalf or anything like that?
No, just leave it to the client. If they want any further input, then we'll put forward a project manager.
Well, good. Keep away from the messy stuff. Yeah,
it works very well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's quite a few. I mean, obviously the shift in the industry towards D&B in the last 10, 15 years has been like almost part of that. But obviously, lots of architects want to be innovated because they need the percentages. But not in the
domestic sector.
No, that's very true. That's very true.
The domestic sector is so unregulated. And clients just they're led by builders. They're like, oh, this is permitted development, we don't need to do anything. I'm like, really? And then they come back to me going, oh, well, they said it was permitted development.
I know, but all those things are changing so much. I mean, you'd have to be really on the ball, regardless of whether you're a builder, contractor, developer, architect, whatever, you're really on the ball to keep up to speed with some of these shifts in, I mean, the Planning Act, which we were all looking at and wondering about, and increased permitted development and Article 4 directions, and, goodness knows what was kind of floating around as being revised, and we were now going to be able to build any particular size because Michael Gove says it didn't matter about space standards, blah, blah. And then suddenly, like, it's now being revoked, right? And then there's a new tear that up, but obviously there's a lot of people who are going with the spirit of it rather than the reality of some of these regulations. Do you know what I mean? So sometimes you can approach a planning inspector who also doesn't know which bit is now currently live. In the same way, I don't know, sorry to waffle on about this, but like with like fire regulations and extra staircases, and all this kind of stuff, if you're doing, no, I know it's not domestic, but if you're doing high rise, there is no law at the moment that says you have to put an extra staircase in a building 18 meters high, but there will be, because that's the direction it's going. So if you're designing something now, obviously in the old days, it would be quick, get your application in quick before you had to put a second staircase in. Now it's kind of like some ethical moral duty to say, oh, maybe I should convince the client to put an extra staircase in, even though it's not required yet, because it may be sometime in the future. So it's a very odd kind of moral shift and political shift. So it's like we're guided by regulations that aren't yet in force. It's a very strange thing. So to be on top of that on a domestic build is very, very demanding, I think.
I know. Well, it's kind of like looking at minimum guidelines and then best practice, and we do have to take a stance. We've just updated our legals, and sort of our kind of contracts lawyer kind of reviewed where they need to be and what they need to say. And about VAT and sort of cooling off periods, and and she was saying, oh, it's not in the RIBA standard documents, and one of the franchisees was like, well, why should we be doing better than the RIBA? I'm like, well, we should be. We do need to look at these things, take a view, and kind of go for best practice, really.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, then it becomes a proper conversation as to what best practice means.
Yes.
And who decides? Don't get me started on the RIBA.
When did you fall out with them?
Oh, well, I've never been a fan. I mean, it's a club, isn't it? And I've never been a club member joining type. But I don't. I mean, okay, I'll keep it brief because I realize I'm talking while being recorded. I think the ARB are. I mean, the ARB are bad enough, in as much as they are now becoming very powerful, more so in the past. I mean, they just used to run around the country, 20 of them, trying to find people that are abusing title. Now they're going to be monitoring on a much kind of wider level. They're going to be recruiting lots of people. They're going to be affiliated to the HSE as part of the kind of new regs changes with the Building Safety Act. And I think they're going to be a little bit of a nuisance. Some might say it's necessary, but it's still a nuisance. The RIBA, I just think, have become kind of incredibly moralistic in there. So rather than just having your chartered practice and your stipulations that, you're going to, as you say, have standards you're going to perform to, and you'll make sure that you are professional and you act with integrity, etc. It's kind of becoming a much more political conversation. I mean, not that I'm averse to conversations about environmentalism and carbon counting and everything, but it's almost like carbon counting has become the central focus of what we do. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's such a, I don't know how you do it. I mean, are you a carbon counting calculator computer type?
No, because our clients typically are the ones that would go to a builder rather than an architect, so they do not have their budget's really limited, and sort of anything green credentials kind of just disappear in the first pass.
They
have money for it.
Although
I'm going to start, I kind of do want to do my own piece of research now onto, can we become self-sufficient? Can we generate our own electricity and power on a domestic scale? Because I've got personal financial interest in it.
No, I understand that. Why pay for heating if you have a fully insulated property that doesn't require heating? I mean, I understand that. I mean, my starting point always was that the national grid was one of the greatest infrastructure projects of all time, providing centrally located, efficient power to every house in the country. And for me, there's something retrograde about saying we need to provide our own individual power to our own house and sod the neighbor. Do you know what I mean? There's something non-communitarian about that approach, very isolationist and almost parochial. So philosophically, I have a problem with it. Although, as you say, for efficiency's sake and for cost savings, it makes a lot of sense. I'm having an extension boat, and I'm going to be using SIPS panels because it's quick, it's simple, it's efficient, it's sealed, ready sealed. So there are new things which, no, it's hardly new, but there are kind of interesting things that you can kind of play around with. And I'm in an old leaky Victorian house, which I had lots of I was thankful for in the heat wave, but not so much in the winter. So I'm a little bit kind of confused about the direction of travel with a lot of these discussions, and a lot of them are contradictory. Anyway, so yeah, there's a lot there to unpick, but we probably haven't got time, mercifully, to kind of
we've just glanced across a number of topics, haven't we?
I tend to go off beam, I'm afraid. Sorry.
So just looking over your bio, it says you wrote and directed over 200 short documentaries for NBS TV.
Yeah.
So
that's not. Well, that's when I worked. So, like I said, I was the technical editor of the AJ for 5 years, and then I met up with NBS, who I knew from Newcastle. I used to work in Newcastle. And I gave them a proposition to bring back easy briefs. I don't know, you're too young to remember easy briefs back in the 70s, which were like hand-drawn idiot's guides to regulations. So I did that with them for about 2 years, illustrating the easy briefs, and we call them shortcuts because easy briefs was a copyrighted title we couldn't get copyright for. So I did that for 2-3 years, I think, and then then NBS bought a film company, completely randomly. So I was thrust into a position of becoming a director of short films, translating these idiots' guides to architecture into short 20-minute kind of useful films.
Can we still find them? Are they still?
They're floating around there somewhere, but I think NBS have got a terrible archiving system. Right. And to be honest with you, I probably did about 250, probably 20 I'm reasonably proud of. The rest are kind of formulaic, interviewing somebody about JCT contracts is not my finest moment, but I mean, they were useful. They were useful. And it's kind of, again, that almost set in good stead teaching practice. You know what I mean? How to get to grips. So it's more the fact that all of that career, that 10 years, I think 12 years, was about trying to get to the nub of really confusing technical issues, and just kind of just get to the simple issues that you really need to get a hold of.
So how, do you think you've kind of repeated those or brought them up to date with the podcast series?
Yeah, a little bit of that. I mean, prior to that, I was an architect, and I was a site architect. That was my job. So it was never about the niceties of aesthetics. It was all about how you get the job done and how you make it work. So I was kind of dealing with on-site cabins with site foremen, knocking up details that the fancy bow-tied architect back in the office hadn't thought about. So I was very much a kind of a practical, dare I say, pragmatic architect rather than a fancy one. And so really, again, I've always been interested in how things work, and how to make them work better. It comes back to the efficiency point as it happens. But what is the core of what is BREEAM? Do you know what I mean? What is it? These are the kind of questions which we kind of let float over our heads. I'm BREEAM excellent. Yeah, what is that then? What does that mean? What do you do if you discover a bat in your loft? I just think these are really fascinating, because I mean, every day somewhere in architecture circles, somebody's discovering that problem and reinventing the research, and finding out what to do about it. And I think if you could just consolidate that, just tell them very simple answers, it's quite handy.
Resource. So what was the last podcast you put out? What topic was it on?
Well, I did the design review panels. And I've just got one now, which I'm just about to edit, on the building regulations changes, which are just bonkers. I mean, fire. You could do an entire series on fire regulations. To be honest with you, I did a very nice one on fire regulations. But Jeff Wilkinson, who's the Wilkinson consultant, he writes for the AJ. He's done one on building regulations, part O for overheating. the first time ever that they put a letter which suits the title. As it just seeing those updates, part L, part F, the whole thing's kind of starting all over again. That idea that, you insulate your building and then you cause condensation problems. So therefore you have to ventilate the building, which then cause leaks. So you have to insulate the building again. It's a kind of a circular conversation we've been doing for the last 40 years. So here we go again. But it'd be interesting to see, where we reach some kind of resolution. This whole conversation now about, Insulate Britain had brought to the fore about how we need to insulate all our buildings to save energy because of the climate emergency, et cetera, and you think, I'm sitting here looking out my window. It's 1880s Victorian terraces, and you think, how the hell are you going to insulate that then, apart from external wall insulation, which will then transform the look of every town and city in the country, maybe for the good, I don't know. But I've just done a report on Birmingham Council, excuse me, which is refurbishing 300 houses for £27 million, which is £90,000 per unit for energy efficiency measures, which, that's, if you pay £5,000 a year, which is what is now reputed to be, our bills are going to be £5,000, it's going to take 18 years to pay that back. So that's quite a capital upfront cost for 18 years down the line, maybe having to redo it again. So there's a madness abroad in this conversation, and it's almost we're responding to things rather than strategically thinking things through clearly, and I think that's really where we need to start. So I'm a pragmatist, but at the same time, my pragmatism recognizes that we need to have strategic long-term thinking. If you can deal with that irony.
And so what's your next podcast going to be about?
I've got a list of them. I've got one on planning legislation.
Okay.
Now that we've just talked about how confusing planning legislation is, and I'm going to do one a little bit more focused on the principal designer and the principal contractor. Right. I've done one on health and safety, and I've done one on CDM generally. Yeah. But it's one of those kind of very confusing things as to what it's like all these things. When you're an architect, your competency requires you to tell the client that they need to appoint a planning supervisor. Sorry, not a planning supervisor,
principal
designer. Strike that, strike that, everybody. I'm teaching this subject, and I tell people off so many times for getting that wrong. So a principal designer, but you're also not allowed. You shouldn't kind of give free information to the client without kind of due recompense as a business. So one of those great ironies of catch-22isms within the industry. So I just want to kind of drill down into that a little bit more. But there's a world of things to explain.
So how would we find your podcast? What's it called?
It's called Professional Practice Podcasts.
Ah, yes.
And they're available at the moment on SoundCloud, iTunes, and Spotify. Just Google Professional Practice Podcast. It comes up mostly on iTunes, I think. And there's about 35, 40 of them, I think, now in the archive. Just to say, in terms of, if any Part 3 students are out there, and my Part 3 students are just about to take their Viva in 3 weeks' time. I made 2, which are kind of quite useful. One is where I interviewed 10 or 12 Viva assessors, examiners, and asked them what they wanted to see and hear, and what is a good candidate. It's quite interesting answers, actually. And then I interviewed 15 students who'd just done their Viva, and what they wish they'd known, what they wish they'd done, what they wish they hadn't said. And again, it's kind of quite a useful one, just to be a little bit more kind of conscious about the process when you enter that room. Do you remember it?
Oh yes, very much so. Very much. I did a stint as a Part 3 assessor as well.
So oh really?
Right. Yeah.
It's very good. I'll have to call on you. Where are you based? Are you Are you in Cheshire?
I'm up in Gatley, South Manchester.
Oh, okay, right. Yeah, I recognise the accent there.
Yeah, so I think I got culled because it was the RIBA Northwest Part 3, and they asked me to sign an insurance waiver. My professional indemnity insurance said, "What on earth is this?"
You make my RIBA point for me. What are they like?
It's like, yeah. They're like, "Oh, people just sign them." I'm like, no, this is the Part 3.
Exactly.
Surely,
you asked me to do
I should be looking at my professional indemnity insurance.
Exactly.
Yeah, they were asking me to sign all sorts of weird.
Yeah. But in your Part 3 yourself, then were you one of those annoying students that came out and said, "Oh, I enjoyed that. What a lovely chat"? Or did you come out sweating?
I think you see, I was working for a I was working for Ian Simpson in Manchester at the time, so you kind of star architect.
Yeah.
My Part 3 assessors were very curious about actually what went on.
Oh dear.
So, there were lots of questions as to how the office was run and kind of
Right.
and I think they were just intrigued.
Well, hopefully, I mean, I make a special point of telling all our assessors to behave themselves, and they're not there to ask questions about the practice or to criticize the work.
As an expert, I remember the building that we did it in, they were sharing an office with Jim Chapman.
Oh.
So I got to use Jim Chapman's microfiche. I was the age of microfiche research, and to be honest, it was I did quite enjoy.
That sounds like a I don't know. That sounds like your first novel. I used Jim Chapman's microfiche. That must be. Yeah.
I enjoyed the rigor of it. I don't think I could do it now.
Yeah. Not me.
I think I absorb information in a different way now. So yeah, podcasts are definitely the
No, it's very generalized for Part 3. You need to know little about a lot, just so you got. I think as long as you can understand the process of thinking about how businesses run, how practices run, how projects run, once you've got a sense of it. So we do like scenarios. So if you are a student and you're working for a big practice, you've never worked on a kitchen extension. And I think you learn more from a kitchen extension than you do from HS2, right? So I give them 3 scenarios. One is a large project, one middle size, commercial, and a small domestic project. We have invented clients, and we have invented scenarios, most of which, by the way, have actually happened to me. And so we set them off on coursework. So we don't have an exam, we have coursework assignments every month. So it's actually quite nice. You genuinely learn. Yeah, so it's funny because you actually learn through invented scenarios of following a project through on paper, not in reality. And it's actually quite nice. But yeah, some terrible things happen in our scenarios.
My base level for anyone wanting to join the franchise, our minimum benchmark is they have to be an architect. They have to be a fully qualified UK architect. So they have to have passed their Part 3s. And that's my standard. Good. Because I know once someone's been through that process.
Good. So they have to be a registered, not necessarily a chartered architect.
Yeah, registered.
Just to reinforce the point.
Yeah. Right. I think that's a nice point to stop on, a commercial point to stop on. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. It's been really lovely talking to you.
And you too.
And I hope the audience can excuse my terrible sunburn, which I've just noticed for the last half an hour. Whereas I thought I was bronzed. In fact, I'm like a beetroot. But anyway, apologies for that. But really lovely talking to you, Lisa. Good luck with these, and we'll speak again. I'll do a podcast with you on business practice.
Thank you for joining me, Lisa Rains, for Architecture in the Den. If you want to find out about franchising, check out our website, prideradefranchise.co.uk. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe and leave a review. And do get in touch through your favourite platform if you'd like to be a guest.